Bonjour, je m'appelle Genot Picor. Today we are going to tell a story of Louis and the haunted sugar cabin. That story took place a long time ago during the Sioux French heritage. Here's how the story goes. There was a man named Louis. Louis was a sucrier, which means he made maple syrup and maple sugar. He made the best in the land. There was one problem though. Every springtime, Louis would go into the forest and he would harvest the same maple trees on the same land and work in the same cabin. But those trees in that cabin and that land, they belonged to Mrs. Fontenot. She was a little old lady. She was a widow. Her husband had died many years ago, and Louis promised to pay her rent for using that cabin, but he never did. He made something so sweet, yet his heart was just encased in greed. And she would say to him in a little old lady voice, "Louis, pay me what you owe me. I'm old and cold and sick and hungry and I need the money." And Louis would say, "Don't worry, I'll pay you," but he never did. Well, he went into the forest, went to the cabin. He opened up the cabin. There were all of his tools from last year. He took something called flint and steel to make a spark. Now, all of you can help me with this. Here's your steel. Here is your flint. Watch me. Watch my hands. The spark flew onto the wood, and the smoke rose up the chimney. And Louis heard a scary sound. I'll teach it to you. Let me hear you. Louis didn't know what that was. He opened up the door. He looked outside, but all he heard was the wind. Louis went back inside. The fire was out. Huh. Well, maybe there was a cold breeze coming down the chimney. Louis didn't think much of it. He took his flint and steel. Let's do it again. And the spark flew onto the wood, and the smoke rose up the chimney, and Louis heard that scary sound. Well, now Louis got mad. He opened up the door and he yelled outside, "Who's ever playing that joke, you better stop." But all Louis heard was the wind. Well, now Louis started to think, maybe something or someone is hiding in the chimney. Maybe it's the ghost of Mr. Fontenot come back to haunt him, because he didn't pay the rent for the cabin, and he could still hear Mrs. Fontenot's voice. "Louis, pay me what you owe me. I'm old and cold and sick and hungry." And Louis thought, that's crazy. There's no such thing as ghosts. He took his flint and steel again. Let's do it. And the spark flew onto the wood, and the smoke rose up the chimney, and Louis heard that scary sound. And Louis thought, "Oh no, it's the ghost of Mr. Fontenot come back to haunt me." And he could feel the fear build in his feet and travel all the way to his head like this. And Louis burst out of the cabin, and he ran all the way back to the village, and he came to Mrs. Fontenot's house, and he pounded on the door. Boom, boom, boom. And Mrs. Fontenot said, "Who is it?" And Louis said, "It's me, Mrs. Fontenot. May I come in?" And she said, "Yes." And Louis burst through the door, and he took Mrs. Fontenot by the hands, and he was crying. He said, "Mrs. Fontenot, I feel so bad. After all this time, I've never paid you what I owed you." And he reached inside of his belt and pulled out all the silver he had, and he gave it to Mrs. Fontenot. And she said, "Thank you, Louis.
Thank you, Louis.
And now I can buy food and medicine.
And now I can buy my food and medicine.
And wood for my fire."
And wood for my fire.
But Louis kept crying. Don't interrupt in the story. It's very important not to, because they don't know the ending. Louis said, "But Mrs. Fontenot, I need to know one thing. Do you think you can find it in your heart to forgive me? I've been so cruel. Please forgive me. Please." Oh, Mrs. Fontenot forgave Louis. He felt like a giant weight had been lifted off of him, and he went back to the cabin. He bid Mrs. Fontenot good night. And as he was walking back to the cabin, why, it started to rain. First came the wind, and then the raindrops, and then a real downpour. And the rain came down and it washed Louis clean, but he got to the door and he heard something different, like this. something always gives me trouble. It was the ghost of Mr. Fontenot. And I'm going to show you that ghost on the count of 3. Are you ready?
Yeah.
1, 2, 3. It was an owl. Who was hiding in the chimney? The owl flew out into the night and Louis never saw it again. Well, Louis took his flint and steel. Let's do it one last time. And the spark flew onto the wood. And the smoke rose up the chimney and out into the night. Now Louis had a warm, toasty fire. And as Louis curled up in front of that fire, this was the last thing he thought of before he fell asleep. Maple syrup might be sweet, but doing what's right is even sweeter. And so it is, even to this day. Good job, people. Thank you. Bonjour, Canada. Au revoir, à bientôt.